this world, this reality, what we call reality, is a constant play of identities and identifications. Everything is in constant modulation and appearance and fluctuation, as are we in our identities. I had a long talk recently with a teacher I respect very much about the importance of identity. And up until that point, I had not called it identity, and I hadn't even realized just how important our personality, which is our main identity, is as such. In any event, it is like our inner nature, what we are as a being, doesn't have any form. It is merely a focus, a personal focus of consciousness we've been talking about now for the last 2 years solid. And this focus of consciousness is aware of everything, but doesn't have a label or term for anything. So as I'm describing this, get yourself into that experience. So there is an intelligence, a wide, vast, diffuse intelligence. There is an emotion. And that emotion is also wide and diffuse, but it's very different from the intelligence. Try to capture what that difference is. And there is, of course, a sense of difference. As a focus of consciousness, I'm here, and there are things around me. In other words, there is a central point. This is the nirvana with seed, the state of nirvana with seed, as it's called in the East. And that seed is your focus of consciousness. Now, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, for the average human being to contact this state and integrate that into your identity or personality. It is extremely difficult for the simple reason that as we incarnate, and I've traced the journey for you over the years, through the dimensions, you acquire that very same focus of consciousness, acquires experience in states of condensation, we could say, or contraction. So as we approach the earth, which is the only thing we can talk about because we are earth human beings, as we approach this center of gravity, which is also intelligent, we acquire different experiences in different states of condensation that make us more and more aware of different details. Now, for those of you, for those of us, for those who are listening who are not part of this training per se, when we have these experiences in meditation of expanding into becoming light that are so blissful, and it's what we seek, we do not connect it with the earth forces. We feel liberated. Today, the need is entirely different. And that became an escapism that got enmeshed very strongly into our purpose of life. So even today, people meditate in order to get away from the tension, the forms, the weight, the traffic of thoughts and impressions and feelings. So that what we're doing or what we're trying to do with Inner Alchemy becomes very difficult to understand. How can we be that tremendous freedom and at the same time honor and be this personality? So now let us look a little bit at the personality. In this state of total freedom, I am. I don't do absolutely anything. To make a long story short and to make it more understandable for us in our daily habits, there is a purpose that we serve by being that tremendous being inside particles of earth that have earth memory, that have a memory of the human being. So this wonderful, expansive state of being becomes transformed as it experiences more and more condensed until it arrives into the form it uses, the dress, the clothing, the structure it adopts during one entire lifetime. Now that identity is the story of your ancestors. It is ingrained in each and every cell of your body as the matter becomes more condensed. So you carry it within you, your mother, your father, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, etc., etc. But you also carry memories from other embodiments, from other times where you've done the same journey, where you've lived. Now, of course, all of these memories of what you've lived are on another plane, one of these different planes or dimensions that we go through and whose powers we adopt. Now, I'm saying all this because we cannot live without an identity. And that focus of personal consciousness, in the sense of vastness, has got to acquire form in matter. So this is why we have the personality. Now the personality is conditioned. It is something, no matter who and how much we may defend that we are original or authentic, we're just a series of identifications, one after another. The only thing genuine or authentic in us is the observer. And remember that the observer is not the thinker. The observer is that state of absolute consciousness which we're capable of accessing any moment. You don't have to do anything. It's always there. The problem is recognizing it. And this series of pressures, because the third dimension is pressures, masses of pressure. Each of the dimensions has pressure. Pressure is what gives form, okay? And what allows us to experience and handle and manage substance. So this need for identity will give us a vocabulary. And what gives us that vocabulary that we can handle and live is the mind. The same training that the mind goes through as it becomes more and more contracted. Now just remember, I have just said a few minutes ago, that when you're in this vast state of beingness, in your being, you do have an intelligence, you do have emotions, and you do have a sense of form or pressure. It is not just, oh, I'm just going to escape. There is recognizably powers. This is what is known as the Trinity or the Trinity of Powers. The same that are working in our personality. Now just look at the contrast. As you are in your body, as you're listening to me right now, you're in, obviously, your body. or something around it, within it, in some parts of it. You're sitting here physically. You have a sense of physicality. You have a sense of your visual aspect as well, and the experiences of being in a body. You have emotions. Now these emotions are all related, always related, to the lower dimensions. In other words, the ones that are closest to the third dimension. So they're all like preserving this image and this identity. Every single emotion. When I spoke about emotions at the highest level, they're not the same emotions as we have down here. This is why I want you to look at the contrast. This is why you find it so difficult so often to make the connection, because you're still very much, you, generally speaking, are still very much attached to the self-preservation, self-enjoyment, or defense system of the physical three-dimensional self. Even emotions of love are related. Even the highest states of love, that are many, that we can experience in the body, are always kind of attached, I say kind of, attached to this form and to the other's form. There's a sense of separation, which there isn't up there, to put a location to it. Because all of that and this is simultaneous. It's all here, now. We use the straight line, we use the alignment to facilitate understanding in our terms down here. But in truth, there isn't that. So this identity is governed by the primary aspect, let's say, of that beingness, which is intelligence. So it's conditioned at every single level. Each one of those stages of contraction develops a kind of intelligence proportionate to its environment, how it relates to its environment. By the time we get down here, we're in the concrete mind. We're in the straight line. We're in 1 + 1 = 2. And you and me are in love. And love exists between us. And we give birth to children. That energy joins in order to create another human being. But the mind is the trouble. And this is what I've tried to explain in the book, ebook, Perception, which I think all of you have read or at least are familiar with. And because our observation is parting from this space where we are now, physically, it has to go through the world of the mind, of forms, of words, phrases, concepts, and distance. In order to explain this, I have to take it into its parts. In a better world, we would just think, and everybody knows the beginning and the end, and the thought is already transmitted. This is how we work up there. Each one of you. Now this is my advanced group. This is the group, I can't say closest to my heart. In a sense it is, because they're all close to my heart. But this is where we encounter the most visible problems. Because you know everything, 14 years now, everything that we have discussed, all the systems. And this is why I had Regina come from Brazil, and you know all the systems, and yet you cannot stand aside. Your vocabulary, your experiences are still centered on the three-dimensional self. Stepping aside from your identity in the third dimension is about the most difficult or impossible task we can ask for. Because we have to put the linear mind, the word, aside, and yet retain its capacity for identification and relating because we use that energy from the higher dimensions through our intelligence, but multi-leveled. So it requires a feat, a tremendous feat and difficulty. How are you going to identify your perceptions and guide yourself as a being into and through your personality? So what do? You start improving. So you make things better. You patch them up, you paint them, you do paint jobs. We all do that. I can't tell you the masses of times I was in front of the different teachers that I've had with my patch-up job, and they kind of look at me and say, like, they didn't have to use the words, like, come on now, here we go again, the violins start playing. So there's no way you can do this. There's no way you can step aside as an exercise, and yet I've given you many, as a preamble, as a way of reaching that state of being and at the same time honoring yourself. Now there's two problems here. One is you don't honor yourself, and two is you're stuck in your mind. Now I've just distributed that little paper, that series of articles on the genders. This is another thing. The genders have a style, it's just a different style. We go through the same experiences, we get at the same point, but we have different perspectives, and those are fixed during the entire lifetime, because we like to play. The soul, the spirit, that absolute being likes to play, and it learns to handle matter, it learns to relate to others, it learns to give a hand to your brother and sister, and that's what we're here for. We call that service. And obviously, the few are the people, and even you sometimes, who understand and apply what it means to serve. It doesn't mean to do things that you calculate need to be done. It doesn't mean to change the others. It means to be present. And this is what linking through this other aspect of mind intelligence is doing. When you are present, everything changes around you. It doesn't just go one way and you perceive an altered reality. Last night, Sandra was doing Reiki on me, and the whole wall, all the walls, everything, and it did so for her too. The walls in my body disappeared, or they danced. They became like dancing particles. We became acutely aware of this very fragile condition we call matter, and yet we think this is solid. So, to perceive such a thing for a normal, ordinary person who's grown up with beliefs of stability and continuity is to go mad. Is to become so afraid. And this is what happens when we initiate at least the path of inner alchemy. I'm sure there's other people doing this work, but nobody talks about it. As I said so many times, it's the initiatic path, and many or most of them are occult from the world. I happen to want to open my mouth and talk about it here and now. So this, let me put it this way, there's 3 journeys of the soul or of spirit. The first one is the descent, that very first time, the descent into matter. Through the womb, through the gestation, you acquire the clothing, the body. The second is the conscious entry into the spiritual world, where you start working on purifying and correcting the personality. So you start clearing the centers, you start learning about energies. Most people stay stuck in the physical. Punto. And the emotions attached to the physical, the linear thoughts attached to the physical, and they do a very nice job of refining that. Thank you very much. I'm not being sarcastic. And we do that as well. Okay, so this is every single one of the centers in our whole integrated being, which is what we do here, which is what you guys have been doing with me for the past 14 years. And the third path is when all of this has been cleared as a personality, within the personality, is when you really enter the path of service. And this is the last trek of the journey, where this whole thing descends. But it doesn't descend for you to disappear into nirvana or into this netherland. It descends so that the vehicle becomes part of the atmosphere. It emanates. And this is what happens each time you are truly in alignment, not just think alignment. Each time you bring those energies of this being into and through your personality, you know you are here. You don't even have to open your mouth. You transform from the sense of perceiving and the sense that you are perceived. This is what in other times was called enlightenment. It affects the environment. Because as we know in this school of Inner Alchemy, everything is energy. Everything. Energy, force, different degrees, qualities, levels of resonance and vibration. So the purpose is to become a conscious player, modulator of identities. And for this, you need to know your identity and have a clear identity here. You cannot enter the spiritual path unless you are very, very defined in your ego. You have got to be very selfish, really, to be here. And each one of us, in that sense of selfishness, has defined ourselves. What we like and what we don't like. It doesn't have to do with what is perfect, what is told to you should be. It has to do with a very simple acceptance of all your heritage, of all you carry with you, of all you look around, feel and perceive. Acceptance doesn't mean that you're going to adopt it. It simply means that you perceive and you know that this is so. In that sense. And this is where the mistake is made. You don't accept yourself, what I was talking about just a few minutes ago. You don't honor yourself, and you are caught in this traffic of the mind and trying to label things. Relating one label to another label. We've done many exercises with and especially in my absence, I give you exercises on relating the emotions, how a woman perceives emotion, how a man perceives emotion, what the difference is between an emotion and a heart, a state of being in the heart. And this is very, very difficult. Very difficult. Because you still insist on putting a label onto that heart feeling. And that label is making better the emotion. Making it socially acceptable. And the heart, as you also know, has a theory, is your real, authentic intelligence. This is where everything joins, everything fuses. And this is your point of power. And it's not love, as the songs and the romantic philosophy, or even the social niceties. The nice person is full of labels. A spiritual person can be nice and gentle and can also be ferocious, fierce. and even angry. Yes. So this is all what we're reformulating in this day and age, in this time now. This is where we find ourselves now. So the job of defining ourselves at first is extremely selfish. Me, 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 me. And in the 20th position, maybe a little bit to the other. And then comes a point, I mean, you've fought with so many aspects of yourself, everybody here. I don't like this, I don't like that, it's not nice, it's not good. I'm not saying that you have to accept that. But you don't change it by force and fighting with it. You change simply by being in your heart. I've said this masses of times before, including in our videos. That state of neutrality we talked about last year. But still, I repeat, it's the most difficult thing a human being can do. To accept yourself, to be in your heart, and to be present. It hurts because you feel everything with everyone. You feel the reality. You feel with a hyphen, the perfection of life. Beyond, or together if you wish, the ugly, gross, brutish aspects that are being manifested. And that seeing being requires, brings with it a sense of responsibility, which is, one, I have to be this, and two is, I have to change this. And you change it through emission. You change it by being yourself. You don't even have to emit and sit there and radiate from your heart, which we do in meditation because it's fun, it's lovely, and we do it at a distance, we do it in service, we do it inside our temple. But in everyday life, because this is where the problem is, in everyday life, this is why I was talking to you last night and this morning, I was saying, are you ready to be criticized? Because in your effort, in your zeal, in your enthusiasm and in your love for the light, you're still coming back to the personality and fixing it. And then you lose track. You lose track. And the terror, I think I can safely say that word, of being nothingness and of being nothing and having no labels, and yet the responsibility of bringing that through your personality is very great. It's really bridging two worlds. So the article that I wrote in my blog, that everyone can access in both languages, Spanish and English, to step aside, is just the beginning. It's just like instructions for this experiential aspect of ourselves. This experience of integrating, which is at the last part of the journey. So now is not the time for you guys, at least these I'm addressing, to be working on yourself. It's time to be. And it's very different. The working on yourself happens at this level by being. It happens. You cannot not see. You cannot not know. And it requires then the maneuvering. Like of this wild child. Many children are wild, if not all. Case in point. Of managing this voltage of this wild child in the world with the awareness of being. So sometimes you have to control it, tone down the voltages, but toning down is not shutting them up. You know that by now. And toning down is not inhibiting either. It's simply management. It's like, focus of light, switch. And if you don't step aside from this learning, this forced learning of relating to things at a distance, from this barrier of the flesh, from this necessary identification and this necessary possession of an identity. Like today everybody's flaunting about identities. I'm gay, I'm lesbian, I'm black. Black is beautiful, that was from my age. All kinds of identification. Yeah, fine. But you're more than that. You have to go around proving it. You know it already. You know what your likes, you know what your dislikes are. Because you've developed, at this level, a sense of ethics. That morality which goes beyond what appears to be happening. Because human love is human love. Whether it is hetero or homo, it doesn't matter. It is love. And that's what takes us to bridging with the being. And that's the purpose of life. To bridge with the being and be able, from that space, be able to know you are automatically irradiating beingness upon the earth. And this is what is lacking. But instead of centering ourselves, I have to keep saying this and repeating, instead of centering ourselves on what we need to arrive at, come back to the present and allow yourself, dare to be. There to be that nothingness within your identity, and use your identity, your appearance, your intelligence, your habits, your vocabulary, your language, your skills. Use them. They're all skills, all of them, necessary for being. Your style. So this is mainly the point I wanted to make this year, at this point. That life is a series of identifications, and a game is a game of identifications. That the connection between who I believe myself to be as an identity and who I am as an essence in constant movement within me is a play of surfaces and depth. And especially the teachers that I'm training, because not everybody who goes through this becomes a teacher, an active teacher. Everybody is a teacher, all of you are. But active in the, teaching other people the concepts and the practices. I constantly say, you need to step aside, transmit, and allow the other person to be. Nothing is going to be achieved by force. And teaching people being rather than doing. Our New Age methods are all, I could even say, infested by different techniques of doing. But rise a little bit and look beyond the surface. Look at the being that's living there. Look at what they're doing. What the person is doing. What you yourselves are doing. With your personal focus of consciousness. That very precious point that I mentioned before, that nirvana with seed. That seed of consciousness. Where it's being directed and what energy it's seeking. At what level. And this is where we must understand in ourselves the management of our personal energy bodies. the other ebook, critical for our work. It's a little bit, common to hear that we are gods. Yes, of course we know we are gods, and we know that we're divine. But we have this very precious instrument of our attention, our conscious attention, which is tied in with intention, which is that focus of consciousness. Where we place that in the personality is going to affect the way we perceive anything. So as you are, so you will perceive, so people will pick up on you, and so you're stuck at one level. And what is freedom? Really? To be at all levels. To be flexible enough to recognize when you step out and when you're being in the center of your universe. Me, in the 20th position, maybe somebody else or something else. So look more deeply. Look and feel life more deeply. Don't ever arrive at conclusions simply from appearances. But to really see yourself is painful from the perspective of the personality. Is painful. I think perhaps the most painful is knowing that you are loved anyway. It hurts to be loved. And who loves you? Yourself. That is the godliness in you. That is the Christ self in you. And to feel that love is that's what you have to let in and be.